Hi, everybody. Welcome to Screen Less, Play More. I am Cynthia, the founder of ScreenLessPlayMore.com. And if you are wondering if your child is ready for a phone, or if you're trying to figure out a tech plan for your family, or if you are dreading the summer and all of the screen time battles that you are anticipating, you are going to want to listen up because my guest today is Andrea Davis. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Cynthia. I'm excited to be here with you.
Thank you. Andrea is a former secondary ed teacher turned screen time navigator. She is the founder of Better Screen Time, where she shares family-tested ideas from the tech trenches as a mom of 5. She is on a mission to help parents take the slow tech road. So welcome.
Thank you.
You got into all of this the same way I think a lot of parents do, which is that you gave your 12-year-old daughter your old phone. So tell us how that went.
Yes. So our family had a big cross-country move from Illinois to Oregon, where we now live. And it was just a chaotic time. Our oldest child had just turned 12, and she's like the ultimate oldest child, the kind of kid that cleans her room without being asked, super responsible. And all these friends that she left behind were starting to get phones. And then we were moving to this place where we didn't know anyone. So between those two things, it seemed like a logical thing to just hand over this abandoned smartphone that we had. And so we did. It was like, okay, you can communicate with your friends you left behind. We can get in touch with you in this town where we don't know anyone. And fast forward a couple of months later, I remember her coming home from school one day, and she was getting her after school snack. She was spooning her cereal into her mouth with one hand like this, and then she was doing this with the other, scrolling and not talking to me. And it was this moment where I realized, this used to be a moment of connection. Like, how was your day? How was school? And conversation. And suddenly this device was getting in the way of that. Well, months after that, I was in the kitchen on my own phone scrolling, and I came across a post from my daughter, and she was lip syncing the words to a song about a Glock. And she had her hand to her head, in the shape of a gun like this. And that automatically pulled a trigger inside of me where I realized, oh my goodness, we were not prepared for this. This was too much too soon. And I just was like, we failed her. So we did the thing that, a lot of parents, it's a hard thing to do, but we gave her a brick phone. We said goodbye to the smartphone for a while. And it was really hard for her. It was really hard for us. But it was one of the best decisions that we've ever made as parents. And it was at that point that I realized it's never too early to prepare, and it's never too late to turn things around. And so with my background in education, and then I still had 4 more kids that I'd be doing this with, I thought, I need to help other parents so that they don't make this poor choice and they make a better decision, but also to help parents know that you can change your mind. And so that's really how Better Screen Time got started.
That's really good for people to know, because if they're listening right now and just thinking, okay, I failed, I'm done, like we're already knee deep in this, my kid's going to completely lose their mind if I take their phone away. It's nice to know, there's options, there's ways to do it. And one thing that's on your website is just a lot of different options of different phones that you can kind of have a tiered approach. Start with, maybe a watch, or like, what are some of those different options that you can go to if you're not ready for a smartphone?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because again, at the time, these options didn't exist, right? This was 8 years ago. And so as parents, we, number one, just weren't as educated. We were all learning as we were going, and then these options weren't available. But now there are a lot of what we call starter phones. So they're like a smartphone, but they can come without social media, without an internet browser, really without games, the things that are most addicting for kids and anyone, really. So we recommend just following this. We call it the smartphone stair steps. So starting with a watch, even just like a Gab watch that can only call 10 numbers. So it really is like doesn't have internet access. It has no ability to get to the internet. It really is like, I need to call my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And, everyone has different approaches on this and like what works for their family. But for us, we really don't even send that with our kids to school or anything. It's more just like, it's kind of like a home phone. And then we send it on occasion, maybe if they're going to a friend's house or the park, and we want to stay in touch about like time to come head home or something
Okay.
like that. But it really, isn't something that's like tethered to them. But I know some families have different situations where the watch may need to go to school, but a lot of our schools now are doing device-free
Right.
learning environments, and so those need to be kept in backpacks and such, depending on the school. But just starting with something really simple that doesn't have internet, doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
social media, doesn't have games. So that's the best way to go, and then taking it very slowly from there.
And are there some of those starter phones that do they look like an iPhone, but they aren't? Because I know, I've had friends who have kids and they're like, well, this phone is so lame. Everybody's going to make fun of me. It doesn't look like an iPhone.
Yeah. I mean, none of these phones will look like an iPhone. Like if a kid is tuned into that and they know what an iPhone is,
Okay.
no, they won't be satisfied in that regard. But it has the features that are needed. For example, I have a 16-year-old daughter who has a pinwheel phone. And it's, I think the phone itself is like a Samsung or something. But, she can talk to her boss at work. She can download the app that she needs for her job.
Okay.
There are a few apps that she needs for school. And unfortunately, I wish that wasn't how it was, but we got by for a long time with, for example, like she was on the tennis team. So we put the Sports U app on our phone and we would just text her every time there was an
Okay.
update. But they were like literally changing the times all the time. So we got by, and I think parents can do that for a long time. But, now that she's 16, this works really well. She doesn't have any social media, but she is able to connect with her friends through text and through, she uses Marco Polo, where you can just send video
Mm-hmm.
back and forth to your friends, people that not random strangers.
Well, I
So
mean, it's
that
good.
works well.
Yeah, because it gives the kids at least something if they want to be texting friends and stuff. And I would also like to remind my children, this is a $600 phone. If you want to
Oh,
get
yeah.
an iPhone, like if you would like to earn the money to get that, it's like I think a
Totally.
lot of us would give our kids an old phone, but sometimes we forget like that was a really expensive phone when we got it.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think, perhaps that could be part of the equation that once your kid is ready, you think they're ready, they think they're ready, you've gone through a tech plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then maybe there is a moment of, okay, you need this added layer of responsibility of how are you going to get a job to pay for this phone and to pay for the
Yeah,
service on it? Because that's, another barrier to see if they are truly responsible enough to be able to handle this.
for sure.
So,
Totally.
um,
Yes.
well, I should say that if people go to betterscreentime.com, there's so many printables and so many resources. And one of the pages is about all the different phones that are out there and watches and just different options. So that's a really good resource for people to
Yeah.
check out if they're wondering about which phones have which functions and everything. Also on your website are a lot of great ideas and plans for summertime because we are
Yeah.
almost there. And some of us are excited, some of us are a little apprehensive. um, so I am wondering what you think are some good parameters for people to have around screen time during the summer and how to kind of broach that plan conversation with kids.
Yeah. I love this question. First off, I think it's important to recognize that we're all in different stages and phases. So, what works if you have a home with a toddler and like a 5-year-old, is going to
Mm-hmm.
look very different than like my home where I've got mostly teenagers. It's going to look different. So, keeping that in mind. Also, what does your summer look like? Like, is somebody getting surgery, or do you have a
Yeah.
lot of travel plans? And maybe maybe you just need a plan for those in between vacation moments, or maybe you're going to be working a lot this summer. Maybe you're a parent who's working and you've got to figure out,
Hmm.
what's going to be happening. So I think just being realistic with where you're at, what your situation is. And obviously, our goal for all of us is to reduce screen time. Like, we know it's not healthy for our kids to be on screens all the
Hmm.
time. So I think just like be realistic with where you're at, but then think, how can we dial this down a notch so that, yes, our kids aren't on screens the whole summer. And some families love to do a screen-free summer. And I think, and that's amazing, and it's totally possible and it's doable, but it does require a lot of planning. It
Hmm.
requires, if you are a working parent, probably a lot of support from other people or camps or those kinds of things. Um, but just so consider, like, what do we want this to look like? And then sitting down with your kids and making a plan together. That this is the same even just when you're making a regular family tech plan. It
Hmm.
always should be collaborative, get your kids on board. And so we have a summer survival guide on our website, and I was pulling that up. And just this is something that we filled out with our kids basically every summer toward the end of the school year before summer starts. And the first question is, we just talk about fun. Like, what are the fun things that we want to do? So I know a lot of families make a bucket list. I don't know.
Hmm.
Do you guys make a bucket list for
Yeah, we try
summer?
to just go through the whole summer of, like what are the main, what are main big fun things we want to do, places we want to visit, what museums do we want to go to, just kind
Yeah.
of slot it out a little bit. So like, I sort of think the most terrifying thing is waking up and just having absolutely no
No
plan.
plan.
And, everybody's going bonkers. And, so definitely we've found that, yes, deciding maybe like one big activity per day seems to really
Yeah,
help give at least a little bit of structure.
totally. Yeah. So just making that list with your kids, like and I like to ask, what are you so excited to do this summer? And I think that's a great question because, again, for me with 5 kids, like everybody kind of has a different thing that is really meaningful for them that makes summer summer. And so just list those activities, and it might be things that are so simple, like just
Yeah.
eating popsicles on the back porch. Like, this doesn't have to be a huge trip or anything like that. It can
I
be
think that's
something really simple.
yeah, it's a really, really good idea to ask the question because I think we'd be surprised at what our kids really want. And,
Yes.
we might be thinking, we need to go to the water park, we need to go to the amusement park. And they might want to do something so minor that's a big deal to them. Like, there was a museum we used to go to, and my son really wanted to go. And I finally asked him why. And he said, because they have apple juice. So it's
Nice.
like, once you really dig into what they're looking for, you might realize, like, oh, maybe I don't need to spend quite as much money as I thought I did. Let's just do a fun day at the park with some apple juice.
Totally. Yes, I love that. Yeah, exactly. So that's why that communication is key. And I love that. And our kids have different things that they remember about summer that they love. The next one is just to talk about goals. So what is one thing you want to accomplish this summer? And I like to let the kids just brainstorm a list, but then really just pick one thing. Because I think sometimes you need to get it all out on paper to be thinking, oh, well, I want to learn how to do a wheelie on my bike, or I want to get better at doing the front crawl, whatever it is.
Hmm.
But letting them just like make the list, but then just kind of pick one thing. Because honestly, between trips and whatever, summer goes by really fast
Hmm.
and you've just got a couple of months. But if they kind of have one thing a goal they want to accomplish, it really helps them. And then you can talk about as a family, like, what can I do as a parent to help you accomplish this? Like, do we need to go to the pool 3 times a week so that you can, master the stroke or whatever it is?
Hmm.
So, let them get in that habit of forming goals, and it can be something fun. It doesn't have to be,
Right.
it can
Doesn't have to
just be
be,
fun.
I want to learn Latin.
Yeah, exactly. And my husband and I do this with our kids. So, for example, the last couple of summers, my husband he does mountain biking, and there was this big bike drop that he wanted to be able to go off of. And it was like kind of scary. It was kind of a far drop. And so I remember that being on his goal list a couple summers. And anyway, last summer he finally did it.
Great.
And that was his goal. And so he has a video of it. The kids weren't there because he was with his buddies when he did it. And
That's
so
cool. So you each, like every member of the family has a
yeah,
goal. I like that.
we all do it. And then that way you kind of support each other. And then the kids don't feel like this is something the parents are saying, you need a goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, let's all have a goal. And then the next one is serve. Like, how could you serve someone this summer? And it
I love
really,
this.
it helps your kids it helps all of us to get outside of ourselves, to get to know our neighbors, or just help our community. And I think that when we're bored or we're lonely or we're sad, that service is one of the best ways to forget about that.
Definitely.
And, you take your kids to the community garden, or, this isn't going to be so much in the summer, but in the winter, sometimes we'll take things to the homeless shelter. Whatever, there's always something in the community where we can go and help out. You can literally just go pick up garbage on your street. It doesn't have to be big.
Yeah, because I was just going to ask, like, do you have ideas for real little kids? Because I know the barrier I've sort of hit sometimes is that a lot of places don't let you go unless you're over 12 or over 14 or something.
Yeah.
So, like, what are some small things that maybe, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds could do?
Yeah, well, picking up garbage always.
Okay.
And if you're worried about, you can give them gloves if you're like worried about picking up, I don't know, gross things or whatever. But yard work, and that can be for a neighbor, just like going and trimming some bushes. We had our local hospital does like a community day where families could sign up, and so it didn't matter the ages, but
Okay.
it was usually doing yard work. So I find that that's like something, just maybe noticing somebody on your street who maybe they're having a hard time or they're sick and they can't hire someone to take care of their yard, and that you can tell like their yard just needs a little love. Making cookies, like I know that seems so simple, but that's something that little kids can help with, is just like cooking.
Yeah, that's great. Like if you know of somebody that's sick or having a hard time or just had surgery or something, they can feel like
they make them some cookies,
they helped
and
out.
a little note, like kids, just drawing a card. And I think there's just little things like that, and it's just good practice for our kids. And then the last one is skills. So how can you keep your hands busy this summer? That's the question I ask.
That's a good one.
So it's like, what do you want to learn to do? And like on our download, we have like, do you love Legos, drawing, writing, origami, crafts, playing the piano, creating hairstyles, playing catch? And again, just like have them make a big list, and then they can kind of zero in on a couple of things. Like, do they want to learn how to crochet this summer, or do they want to learn how to play an instrument? And then you can come up with some resources, whether that's from the library, or that's a friend, or it's a family member that can help them learn that skill. That's really helpful. And so the reason why we start with this is because when we fill our lives with lots of good things, then we just have less time for screens.
Yes.
And that's just the reality. And it's not that you might not use a screen for one of these. Perhaps like if somebody is learning how to crochet and you don't know how to, maybe you do need to look ahead and find a couple of appropriate like YouTube videos to help with that. And you can, make that possible. So, but again, like you're using a screen with a purpose. And so I think that then the other part of this download really is just making your summer screen time plan. And for us, our summer screen time plan really isn't different than our school year plan. But for some families, it may be different. But for us, again, we just talk about like, where are we going to use screens? What are we going to do on them? How long, where, when, what, how long? And we don't really use screens more. It's about the same. And we have like our family movie night, but you could also talk about, are there screen-free days that you want to have? Or does your family have a camping trip lined up where you're just going to have a screen-free week that week? And with young kids, if, those of you that are listening that have young children still, you really have a lot of control over this and over the summer. So it's just like, how much time and energy do you have? But what I have learned is that you can set the norm in your home and your kids really will just gravitate toward what you provide, right?
Hmm.
So just having things available, going to the library and getting new books and keeping those things available and accessible and play dates with friends and those kinds of things and just being clear with other families that yeah we're doing you can say we're doing a low screen summer. So
Hmm.
when we do play dates, we're just looking to stay off screens, and here's a few ideas we thought of. What ideas do you guys have? And I think most parents deep down don't want their kids just sitting on a screen all summer. So
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is such a good plan. Once you actually sit down, think about what you want to do. If you had a handful of things you were excited about, a handful of things, to do to reach your goal, a handful of things to keep your hands busy, all of a sudden, that really is going to fill up a lot of the summer. And there's
it
not
is.
going to be just these endless afternoons. I'm bored. What should I do? What should I do? That's one of the great moments of like, well, you said you really wanted to learn how to juggle. Let's work on that.
Yeah.
You said you really wanted to, go to the bike park and get really good at doing the jumps. And so I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to fill in a lot of this time and be proactive about like
Yes.
at the end of the summer, how do we want to look back and have spent our time? And I would tell people like, don't shy away from being bored though. There's a lot of good in being bored occasionally and daydreaming and coming up with good ideas. I mean, how do you tend to respond if your kids say, I'm bored? Like, do you
Yeah,
kind of
they
have a
know.
go-to?
Yeah, they kind of know they'll probably get a job if they say they're
Yeah.
bored. So it's like, and we do keep a list on the summer. In the summer, we do keep a list on the fridge of things to do, and that we have a download on our website, and it's called When You Want to Do Nothing. And the reason why we did that is because when I was looking for ideas of screen-free things to do, it just seemed like they were things that either took a lot of time or money or really required a lot of parental
Right.
oversight. And I just wanted a list where it was like literally my kids could just
Yeah.
do this on their own at home, whether they, without extra money or resources or anything. So we have that download on our website
Yeah,
as
that's a
well.
good one. I looked at it. I think it's over 100 ideas of things to
Yeah.
do.
No, and you can come up with your own list, like if you, as a family, when you're doing this, you can also be like, hey, let's come up with some boredom busters and write them down and put them on the fridge. And like you were saying, I mean, you're being proactive about it. And so then when those dreaded words come, because they will, you can be like, hey, look, remember, here's our list we
Yeah.
talked about.
And I think with really, really little kids, I sort of learned the hard way to find open-ended toys. Because if you
Yeah.
get the thing that's like, you go to Target and you get the little eggs that you put in the water and then there's the prize, that's maybe 10 minutes. And all of a sudden,
Yes.
oh my gosh, I have to come up with another idea. I just felt like
Yeah.
COVID was like one thing after another of 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here. And then I set up the sensory bin and then I set up the this and set up the that. And I felt like I was like a
Yeah.
full-time preschool teacher. And I finally realized because my kids were 2 and 5 during
Oh,
COVID.
yeah. You were
And I
in the
finally
middle of
realized,
it.
wait a second, pull out the train set, pull out the blocks, pull out the Legos, do,
Yeah.
cushions for a fort. And then you're like, oh my gosh, they've been playing for an hour and a half. This is amazing. Because otherwise,
Totally.
oh man, some of those toys and games barely give you time to go to the bathroom. And then they're like, what's
So
next?
true. Yes. No, it's so true. And it is amazing how simple, like how sometimes simple things can keep kids happy. So I have 4 girls and 1 boy. And I know like when my boy is number 4, and I know with him, like he needed different things to keep him happy. And he actually really didn't like toys and just like the sense of just toys. And like he didn't really love balls. He didn't really love trains. And it took me forever, but I found out that he loved puzzles and he would sit and do puzzles forever. But
Wow.
that was just him.
Hmm.
So puzzles worked well. It would keep him happy. But also, I remember just giving him a spray bottle with water in it, and just we had a fenced yard, and I just would send him outside, and he just loved just spraying things, and like there was nothing he was gonna hurt. And he would just go out and just spray, 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 like the
That's
house,
good.
whatever. And I was like, great, this is great.
My
So,
grandma used to give us a paintbrush and a bucket of water, and we would pretend to
oh,
paint the fence, pretend to paint the garage door. Like, I don't know how long that kept
same
us
kind of
entertained,
thing.
but
I
yeah.
love that.
Oh man.
Yes,
And we thought it
that's a
was so
great idea.
fun.
Totally. Yes, I love that idea. Very similar thing.
Now, it might be a little bit different than for a teen. What
Yeah.
kind of parameters do you think people should talk about if their teen has a phone? And, probably it's really good to talk about expectations, because the teen thinks this is going to be awesome. I'm going to be on Snapchat all day long. And you're thinking, no way. And if you talk about it
Right.
ahead of time, you could probably stave off a lot of really big arguments. Like, how could it look for them? What boundaries? And also, I think you had mentioned on your website, it's important to give teens responsibilities over the summer.
Yes, that's like one of the primary things is if your teen doesn't have a job outside of the home, then they need some jobs in the home,
Mm-hmm.
and or both. And our teens they actually do both. So yeah, they need a responsibility, whether they're working for someone else or they're doing jobs for you. We do sit down and have a lot of conversations about just like bedtimes and like the conversation that mom and dad still have to work. And so we still have to go to bed at a decent hour, even though they don't have school and maybe
Mm-hmm.
their job doesn't start till 11 in the morning. And we have conversations about, these are things that need to be done at home prior to, either maybe going to work or hanging out with friends or whatever. And so when they have those responsibilities, they don't have time to sit and spend on a phone forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just some of the parameters that we always share and talk about that are part of our family tech plan, like we don't take devices in the bedrooms or bathrooms. That automatically eliminates a lot of contention and strife
Mm-hmm.
because as I talk to parents, a lot of their teens are just in their room on their phone forever.
Yeah.
And so that's just not an option at our house. And it's worked really well because the room is for sleeping or for resting, or, they can listen to music in there. They have smart speakers so they can still listen to music, but they don't need a screen. And, so there are ways around it. So just having those kind of parameters around your tech is really important.
I think
Our
that's super
Wi-Fi turns
important.
off.
Um, did you see the show Adolescence on Netflix?
Yes, yes.
So I think if anybody checks that out, that's sort of a worst case scenario of not knowing what your child is doing on their phone in their bedroom all the time, hours and
Right.
hours and hours a day. And they can be watching all sorts of videos that are getting them radicalized. They can be getting bullied. They can be bullying other people. And so I think that's an excellent parameter of you can't be using your smartphone in your bedroom by yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. So just having those boundaries in place and then being smart about delaying social media and video games and those kinds of things that are most addicting to, for lack of a better word, but
Mm-hmm.
really the things that are more addicting, delaying those things or having some real limits around them, whether those are limits that you've placed on the device itself through some parental controls or they're decisions that you've made as a family. But you have to have time limits around those things because otherwise, they're just going to be on it forever because it's never ending.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
exactly. It's meant to be that
Yeah,
way. It's designed that way.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
I had heard you say somewhere, don't use screen time as a reward. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So this is fascinating. And especially this time of year, right before summer, you will see charts pop up on Etsy and Pinterest and everywhere that are like this long list of things that kids need to do. And then at the end, it will be like, and then you get screen time.
Mm.
And the problem with that is that we are placing a lot of emphasis on the screen time. We're giving a lot of attention, a lot of weight to that opportunity to be on a screen. But what works better if screen time is just another thing that we do sometimes. and it's just integrated into our lives as something that we might do. But when we give it all this power and we're like, it's the ultimate reward, that is when we're honestly creating a habit loop for our kids. And just as I've done a lot of reading and research on habits, like reading, Atomic Habits or Charles Duhigg's books on habits and things, it is fascinating how that's how our brain works. We're like, okay, I do this thing and then I get this reward. And so if we are constantly every day do all these things and then you can spend hours on a screen, we're just reinforcing that habit loop.
Like so if I get my chores done, I get a reward if I do this. And then they always expect that reward. It's like, well, I'm not going to unload the dishwasher unless you give me screen time.
Yeah. And then kids are confused as they get older and they're teenagers when they want to unwind and relax and almost reward themselves with a screen, or parents are confused when kids want to do that, but that's the habit that's been reinforced all along.
Okay, yeah.
So it's not that we shouldn't get other things done before we do screens, because we should. But I think something that's helpful is, number one, just not having like recreational screen time being a part of like every day if you can help it, having it happen, on occasion. But also, I mean, like if you've got really little kids, just having a predictable time of day when it might be best for you as a parent, whether that's preparing dinner or there's just a time of day when you kind of do need that and you're being, you're making sure the content that they're watching is appropriate, then that honestly with younger kids works really well. Just having this predictable time when, okay, at 4:00, you guys can watch a show until 5, and just having it be really predictable. But the problem lies when we make charts and in our conversation, we talk about it all the time. We're using it either punitively or as a reward, then we're just giving it too much power. So I realize it feels like a fine line, because yes, we still should have chores and expectations done, but I think it's just how you talk about it and how you use it is the difference between it being a reward or not.
Yeah, I definitely need to think about that one, because I don't use it as a reward, but I definitely use the like, okay, if you don't do such and such, you don't get your screen time. So I feel like,
right,
because I think to myself, great, I don't care if they lose their screen time, like no skin off my teeth. But then, like you said, I think that probably gives it too much power, because it's like, oh, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
So I might want to think about like different things to take away if they don't do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and it's natural because it works so well, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. It certainly motivates them.
Yeah. And so it's just like, well, okay, let's think of maybe what's the reward that we get if we get our stuff done instead, rather than taking things away, right? So like, okay, let's try to get all of our stuff done by noon, and then we can run to the park and have a picnic or whatever it is, or even something as simple as I'll go jump on the trampoline with you guys, because that's something else that I say a lot, is just reward your kids with your time, not screen time.
That's a good one.
We're parents we're all busy, but it can literally be 10 minutes. Let's go, you guys get your stuff done, and then let's play for 10 minutes and have some lemonade. I don't, simple, something.
Yeah, just keeping
simple.
It positive instead of punitive.
That's
a good idea.
Totally. Yeah.
I'd love to talk about your book. Andrea wrote a book called Creating a Tech Healthy Family, 10 Must-Have Conversations to Help You Worry Less and Connect More with Your Kids. And it is such a good play-by-play, almost like a workbook if people are diving into this as a new thing of like, okay, we got to figure out a tech plan. And it tells you how to sit down with your family. It kind of gives almost like icebreakers kind of to like hook them into each topic. And so the thing that you start with why. Why is this important? And I thought it was interesting. The first discussion topic that you list is that it's important to explain to kids that technology is a tool. Like, you need to kind of ask yourself, am I using it or is it using me? And kind of how do you tend to like broach that subject with your kids, or how do you tell people to do that?
Yeah, so we have this great lesson. It's called the toolbox lesson, and it really is, it's the first one in the discussion guide, but sometimes I will do like a live webinar with families and we'll do this all together live. But essentially you just start with a toolbox and put your phone in there somewhere where, the kids won't see it, like bury it in, but you'll turn the toolbox like toward you so they can't
Like a
see what's inside.
literal toolbox, like you
A
get it out of the
literal
garage.
toolbox. Yes, literal toolbox. And put your phone in there. Don't let them see that you did that. And then just start asking them, like, what do you guys think is in my toolbox? And they're going to be like, a hammer, nails. And you just pull stuff out as they say it. And then at the end, you'll just say, yeah, and there's something else in here that you might not guess. That's also sort of a tool. And they might figure it out, but usually they don't know what you're talking about. And then I'll pull the phone out and I'll just say, what's this? Okay, well, it's a phone. Well, how could this be a tool? And then we talk about how, if you give like a 2-year-old the hammer, right, that they're probably not really going to know how to use it, and they're maybe not going to use it wisely. But if you give it to like someone a little older who knows how to use a hammer and what it's used for, like what's the difference there? And so we just start a conversation, and then we talk about the things that we love about tech. So we make like a thumbs up list, and we're like, okay, well, how can we use a phone or a device as a tool? And how can it be used well? And so we just do like, okay, thumbs up, what are the things we love about tech? And make a big long list. And then on the other side, you'll make a thumbs down list, and you'll just say, okay, what are the things that we need to watch out for? Like, what are the bad parts of technology? And again, you make your list. And this conversation is so powerful because it gives families and kids a chance to see, like, where are we at? Like, how much do your kids know? Like, do they bring up pornography? Do they bring up cyberbullying? Do they bring up online predators? Or do they not? And obviously, like, you can guide this conversation based on how old your kids are, right? Because like your kids are younger than mine. And so the ways you talk about this might be a little different than I would with teenagers. But when I first started this conversation, my youngest was like 3 and my oldest was like 13. And so we kind of we kept it pretty basic, but we did talk about like these different things. And so that's powerful because you can see where people are at, but you can also start to talk to your kids about this skill that I call digital discernment. And that is the skill of being able to distinguish between right and wrong and good and bad. And it's kind of like, technology isn't one or the other. It can be either. It can be both. And so that is such a powerful thing to teach our kids, that it can be used for good. Technology can be used for bad. Let's start talking about the differences. And so as your kids get older, we're not always going to be there when they're on tech, or they might be on the bus and somebody shows them something, or they're at school, or they're at a friend's house. And so they can start to think, oh yeah, I remember when we had the toolbox lesson and we talked about, maybe bad pictures that make me feel sick inside. And I'm like, I think that's something that I need to mention to my mom, that I saw this. And it's just, you're opening that dialogue, you're opening up that door.
Right.
And that's going to be that's the best parental control out there in the end.
Yeah.
To keep them safe. So that's the first conversation I always tell parents to have. Do the toolbox lesson.
Okay. And it's a fun idea because I think it'd be really memorable to them because it's so hands-on. And then that's like a good introduction. And then from that point, I guess then is when you guys decide the what, when, where, how much, what does our family feel comfortable with? Like saying no phones at the dinner table, no phones in your bedroom. Like you said, perhaps just saying, we'll watch it every day at 4:00, or I guess you just kind of choose, like, we're going to watch, during the summertime when my kids were really little, I remember it was like, we'll watch a show while you eat lunch, or like just choosing one sort of thing. But then also one thing you mentioned in the book is deciding what's the consequence if you don't abide by the rules. And like, what have you found to be a successful consequence?
Yeah, for us, really, it's just generally taking a break from the screen. If that, I think parenting experts talk a lot about how if there's a misbehavior, that the consequence should be aligned with that.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm saying, like, we don't want to, for everything, be like, okay, I'm taking the devices away, because is that related to, like, if my teenager broke curfew and they got home late, like, is that a reason to take away a phone? No, it's not related. So
got it.
Again,
Okay.
kind of going back to that. But like, if they are, like, let's say you're in your family tech plan, you decided that they could play a game for 30 minutes, but they're consistently never following through, or they're sneaking it somehow or whatever, they'd be like, I guess we need to take a break from that game for a while, because you're having a hard time getting off of it, and we have other things that we are more important for us to stay healthy and stay connected. And it's a fun thing, but it's not necessary. So we're going to take a break from it. It can be as simple as that, where you're not totally placing the blame on your kids. And you can even, when I talking about the why, like, talk to them about persuasive design and about how addicting this technology is. And like, it's even hard for us as adults to get off. So that's why we can just say, I just don't want you to be addicted. I don't want you to, you struggle to be able to get off of devices and when you get older. And so I think when it comes to breaking rules that are related to tech, it totally makes sense for the consequence to be related to that.
That does make sense.
And
yeah. To just
every
say,
home will be different, right?
Yeah, we had an agreement. You kind of talk about the issue of trust, and it really is related. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like,
for
the most part, like, we live in a small house, and our kids know, like, we keep screens in the open, and we kind of just can keep tabs on that. But, if there have been times when my second oldest is still here, like, she'll have her phone in her pocket, and she'll go back to her bedroom. And I think sometimes she's really not even thinking about it. But sometimes I think she maybe she is not really forgetting, like, she remembers it's in her pocket. And so if it has ended up in her room, then it's kind of, for us, it's like, you get a warning. And then if that happens again in the immediate future or sometime after, then you have a break from your phone for a day. Yeah. And that's a pretty big consequence as a teenager.
Yeah, I bet.
But it works. And it's, again, it's such a part of our plan that it rarely happens, because she doesn't want that consequence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I have another teenager who that never happens, who also has a phone. And so, again, kids are all different, and they will push boundaries in different ways. And so you have to work with your kids to kind of see what consequences can work for them. So that's why I don't even in the book necessarily say, like, these are the consequences you should have, because it just will depend on your kid.
Yeah.
What's going to work.
Yeah. One thing you just kind of alluded to that is one of the big discussion questions in the book is pornography. And I actually just read a book recently. It's called It's Time to Talk to Your Kids About Porn by Greta Eskridge.
Oh, yes.
It's great. And I think the sad thing is that it's kind of never too early in a way, because they may see it at school. They may stumble upon it just somehow. And, in Greta's book, she says that your kids don't even have to know what sex is to learn how to be safe around porn, because, her thing is like, they're totally different things. One is completely fabricated and just could be violent, and and you don't even really want your kids to equate those two things in their head.
Exactly.
So you can just talk about sort of like, if you see something where somebody has their clothes off, like, you don't even have to mention sex. But I thought you have a really interesting way to kind of remember what kids need to do. And you have this acronym that says WAR, like WAR.
That was what my kids came up with.
So totally. Like, what's that tactic that we could teach kids of, like, if you see a picture or a video or something that makes you feel uneasy, uncomfortable, looks like it could be inappropriate, makes you have that weird feeling in your tummy, what do you do?
Yeah, well, honestly, the best resource on this, which I mentioned in the discussion guide, is Kristen Jensen has some books called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
Okay.
And one of them is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, and it literally is for like starting at age 3
Okay.
to, and I have one right here by me, but it is explained in such a great way. And she always says, first your kids need a definition of pornography. They need to know what it is. And so she shares some great definitions in there. And she really is the expert on that. So
Okay.
I recommend that people go check that out. But another big part of it is for them to be able to walk away from it, to get away from it, and to tell someone. And those are all really important parts of rejecting pornography. And just like you said, and like Greta talks about in her book, is helping your kids distinguish the difference between, a healthy relationship and what's happening when these porn companies are literally selling
Mm-hmm.
sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their version of what sex is. And so our kids need to know that, like, there is a difference. This is what pornography is. And then, yeah, teaching them to turn it off, shut the laptop, walk away, but also super, super important for them to tell someone what they
Yeah,
saw.
you mentioned the 10-minute rule. Um,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah. So
expand on
that,
that?
yeah, I think that comes from Deanna Lamson, and she said that they have found that if kids will tell someone within like 10 minutes, that they're more likely to tell someone. Like, I think it's like
Yeah,
anything. If we would,
you
the
said,
longer we wait.
yeah, the quote is one of the highest indicators of whether a child will return to a pornographic image is whether or not the child has told an adult. So like your
Yeah,
WAR, W walk away, A alert someone, R relax.
totally. And that follow-up is like finding something else to do, right? And so that was just like kind of an acronym that my kids came up with. So my I guess advice to parents is like read those books from Kristen Jensen, have that conversation, but then even personalize it by having your kids come up with maybe their own kind of plan of what they're going to do. And then just and letting them know that it is addicting, like people, because we're curious, and that they're not bad for wanting to see it or accidentally stumbling upon
Mm-hmm.
it. Like they're not bad. So that is a really important part of the conversation, and telling them that they won't be in trouble if they
Mm-hmm.
come tell you, that you
Mm-hmm.
want them to come tell you, because that is going to help them clear their mind, clear their heart, and to not carry that guilt, and also just to help them not kind of feel like this, oh, this is something I want to return to, because through that conversation with you, hopefully we can be a safe place for them to come to, that then they're kind of feeling like, oh yeah, I can leave that behind. And, and if they are like curious about sex or bodies, then as a parent, what are some other resources that we can provide for them to fill that need and fulfill that curiosity?
And I think this is so great because you're empowering your kids to have this information, and then, you can protect them as much as you can at home with routers and with, checking their phones and whatever. But as soon as they're at a friend's house, as soon as they're at school, like this enables them to know, oh, that's the kind of stuff mom and dad told me was not healthy for me. I'm going to walk
Yes.
away. I'm going to tell the teacher. I'm going to tell mom. I'm going to tell who, like it helps you to give it like you like a little peace of mind when they're out of your house, because that's
Yes.
probably the main time that they're going to see it is with somebody else, probably.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that exposure really just can happen anywhere. But, you'd be surprised how many kids just come across it in their own home,
Well,
obviously
yeah,
accidentally, like advertisements and things like that. But
true. Just
it
clicking on
can,
some random thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it can easily and does often happen from exposure from other people showing them too, for sure.
Um, I want to just move on to this list that you have on your website that I think is so valuable if people are trying to decide if their child is ready for a phone. You have two sides of a list, and one is the questions that your teen needs to ask themselves to figure out if they're ready for a device. And then the other side is for the parent. And I've done a lot of research in this area, and there were things on here that hadn't even occurred to me. I think this list is so valuable. And so like on the kids side, it's like, do I get ready for school on my own? Am I responsible for my own belongings? Do I feel comfortable communicating face to face? Do I have screen-free hobbies that I purposefully devote my time to? Like, yes, like what are some of these ideas, and why is this so important before we hand over a device?
Yes. Well, based on my story, like I learned this the hard way, right? By handing it over too soon. And so I put on my teacher hat and I thought, what worked best in the classroom when I was trying to kind of get compliance? It was always to have a conversation and collaborate with my students.
Okay.
And I thought it's the same way at home. And so we gathered our kids around and I asked them 2 questions. I said, number 1, what does it mean to be responsible? And number 2, what does it mean to be emotionally mature? And our kids came up with all kinds of things. And they're the things that are on the self-evaluation, like, okay, will you get up for school on your own? If you're emotionally mature, you don't fight with your siblings. You don't throw a fit when things don't go your way. And so as we had this conversation, we were just writing things down on the giant Post-it note. And I was like, this is awesome. I was like, yes. And these are all the things a person needs to do before they're ready for a phone. And my kids were like, oh,
you trapped us.
Yes. And I was like, this is a reality. But I think they understood and knew because we had gone through this experience and just decided, okay, we're going to take this much more slowly from now on. And then for a long time, we just had the side for the teens, or, I say kids because kids start asking for a phone. And so you're welcome to use this with your kids. But in reality, I have purposely written that it's for teens just because we don't advocate giving phones to kids.
Right.
So that's kind of why that language is there. But you can certainly use it with your kids when they start asking because it's going to help them to know that they're not ready. But then we added this side for the parents because as parents, we have equal, if not more, responsibility to prepare our kids. And so I think if you're going through those questions and it's asking, have I talked to my kids about online predators or about, artificial intelligence and deep fakes and all of these things.
Yeah.
And you're like saying, oh, no, we haven't talked about this or that. Then it will help you as a parent be like, oh, yeah. I've got some work to do.
I read that part. It says, have I talked to my teen about digital predators, sexting, pornography, nudes, deep fakes, gaming addiction, bullying, body image, phishing, self-harm, online privacy, AI? And most people, I'm sure, are going to say no. And I think it's a wake-up call that if you haven't talked to them about it, and if you're not willing to talk to them about it because you feel like that's embarrassing or they're too young, then that's definitely your alert to yourself that no, your kid is not ready, because they are definitely going to encounter those things. And if you haven't talked to them about it, they're going to have no idea how to deal with it. And so I think that was, reading that one, I thought, oh, wow. That's a lot to deal with. And
it is. And I love what you just said about like, oh, am I as a parent, like feeling like, oh, I shouldn't talk to them about this because they're too young?
Yeah.
Like red flag right there, like that's what you're handing them. So if you don't feel comfortable talking to them about that, then you definitely should not don't want to hand over a phone.
Yeah. And, it has even more questions than that. So people should definitely check it out. It's betterscreentime.com. And it's a great checklist for people to go through, because I think if the parents went through the parent side, they'd suddenly realize like, whoa, I don't even want to talk about this yet. And like you said, let's say your 10-year-old is asking you, you could just go through the child side with them, and they might suddenly realize, oh, whoops. Yeah, I don't clean my room. I'm constantly losing my lunchbox. That is a nice wake up call for them to realize some of the stuff that they need to step up and start doing to seem responsible enough for a device.
Totally. Yes,
and it could even be a 17-year-old. Who knows?
Yeah.
And if
that's funny you said that, because I've actually had a mom who told me that she printed it out for her 17-year-old son, and he had taped it on his wall in his bedroom, and he even told his mom that he wasn't ready yet. And I was like, that's a sign of emotional maturity.
So it really doesn't matter the age. It matters like if they can do, I mean, obviously there should be like a basement level of age, but like you could be 22 and still not ready.
Totally. Whereas you might be using a simplified device. Like you maybe shouldn't have games or social media or an internet browser on your phone. And that's okay. I've had parents with college students who are like their child never had a phone at all. And then they handed them a phone when they went to college. And so there wasn't a lot of conversation or preparation that had gone on. And there were some mishaps. And they've even gone back to a starter phone just because that's what that child needed, even in college. And so it's not, kids, we're all different and we all have different needs and we all have different things that are going to suck us in, right? And so it's just like, as a parent, just again taking the slow tech road and being mindful of what your kid needs at each stage.
Yeah, there is so much to discuss. I feel like we could talk for 10 hours. But I have one last question for you that I ask everybody, because I feel like part of this puzzle, it's screen less, play more. But I think a big part of this puzzle of helping kids to have a full childhood is more independence, more freedom, more responsibility. And so I'm wondering if you could share a memory that you have of a time when you were a kid or a teenager when you got to do something on your own without adults. Like maybe you were by yourself, or maybe you were with a bunch of friends and there was no adult and you thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm allowed to do this. This is great. And like, how did it make you feel?
Yeah, I love that question. Well, I was kind of fortunate in that I grew up in the country. I'm from Idaho, and my dad was actually a potato farmer.
Oh, wow.
And so I spent a lot of time outside and had a lot of freedom as a child to just run up the dirt road. And we had a stream and we had, a little pond that was down the road. And so I would go catch tadpoles and
fun.
All the things. And so I think just really from an early age, I had a lot of freedom.
That's nice.
And experienced that pretty early on. But again, I grew up in kind of this safe place, safe environment where that was okay.
I mean, I think some parents would think, oh no, she's by a stream. Oh no, she's going to fall out of a tree. It was nice that your parents were just like, hey, let's just let her go, see what happens.
Exactly. And I think that that's the kind of childhood that our kids are missing out on, because we do, again, it's great that we have so many more protections and things that do keep us safe, like bike helmets and safety belts and those kinds of things. But we certainly need to let our kids play and just enjoy that freedom. So that's really what comes to mind, is just that freedom of being outside. And I think that's one of the best gifts that we can give our kids, is that there's actually studies about that healthy risk taking and that kids need that for healthy development. And so I think in any way that we can allow that, it's not dangerous, it's just risky. And then there's a difference, right? And that's what I experienced as a kid. And I think that's really what all kids need now. So I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you so much for giving us all of this fantastic information. What's the best place for people to find all this and contact you? Because you also have classes, right, that you offer?
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff.
We have a Tech Healthy Family Hub where we have a community of parents can come and take our online courses. We have one called Creating a Tech Healthy Family, another Untangling Teens and Tech. And we teach classes, a live class each month. And then ironically, you can find me on Instagram at Better Screen Time. That is the watering hole where all the parents are. So that is where I try to reach parents and spread this message. And then, of course, just our website, betterscreentime.com.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Screen Less, Play More, the podcast. A special thanks to Neil Penninger, who composed our theme music. Please join us at screenlessplaymore.com for ideas on how to get your kids outside, away from screens, and enjoying independent play. We also have book reviews, screen-free toy and gift ideas, and so much more.